So you want to play Verdance. Why? No, but like really, you should probably think about that in the first place, since getting into Earth Heroes right now can be a bit daunting, let's say. But sure, whatever it is, I'm sure it's a nice, wholesome reason, like, wizards are cool, I love combo, and like, control decks are sweet, and you'll enjoy life gain, and like, maybe like value grinding. Wait, no, stop. So anyways, you locked yourself on trying out Verdance, you pulled out of your failing stock portfolio to be able to afford the list, you play a game, and then your immediate first thought is, what the actual fuck is this deck and how do you win any games? No, look at this hand. No, like, actually look at the hand. What does it do? What does any hand do? Why do you draw something like this like 3 times a game? It's not functional, it's garbage. Trash hero, move next, play Aurora, win games. You know, just fix the meta. You might think, well, what does Verdance do well when you look at these hands? Maybe she has some great hands hanging in the balance somewhere. You would say, well, maybe she blocks well. And then you look at the average block value of Verdance in any deck list ever. And then you're like, well, okay, maybe she combos well. And then you realize that that's not really a good game plan and that sometimes the deck doesn't even let you combo. And then you're like, well, maybe she mid-ranges. She's a mid-range deck. Earth, we just mid-range well. And then there's this hero that exists called Florian that you should probably just be playing instead. And then you're like, oh, well, maybe life gain. We'll just use life gain, and we'll just life gain fatigue. And then you look at the text on the bottom of the hero that says wizard, and remember that that's just not how any of this works. No, the real answer to what Verdance actually does is that she's just really flexible. Probably even a little bit too flexible. She just gets to dictate kind of just how the game goes. She controls the game pace, she can fit her deck into a bunch of different game plans, but this flexibility just kind of comes at the price of sucking a little bit. Don't get me wrong, I think the hero is strong, but also she sucks, like real bad. Don't just take my word for it, that's just kind of the general sentiment of playing the hero.
So I start playing her, and I realize pretty quickly, as most people who played Verdance have probably figured out, that the deck sucks. The deck sucks.
And looking at the cards, I think that this deck does not have what it takes. Plain and simple.
Most of their hands suck. They have to they're not running adequate blues to begin with. Like, the deck's not that good once you actually know what is going on.
The term sitting duck comes to mind.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm playing Verdance and I'm just like sitting duck / punching bag.
Everyone knows she sucks, and yet I'm still kind of out here just winning games. And I keep winning games. Maybe I'm just like coping out of my goddamn mind, but I think the hero's pretty good. So I wanted to kind of make this as an initial guide for players that might look to get into the hero, what to expect, what to actually look for, and it should help you get a bit more of an informed opinion of whether or not you actually want to play Verdance. So why am I playing her? Well, I think the best part of Flesh and Blood is the back and forth, the grind. I think that the more hands you see in a game of Flesh and Blood, the more that the player who is higher skilled or was better able to dictate the pace of the game is gonna win. Is this the pivot hand? Is this the pivot hand? How much damage can I afford to take before I start chucking haymakers back and taking the game back in my swing? If you enjoy this type of gameplay where you feel like you're just kind of slowly dying and then you do some sort of massive swing and just turn the whole game on its head, then maybe Verdance is for you. In other words, I love playing decks that are just designed for bad people, and if you like decks for bad people, you might also like Verdance. So how do you actually win games as Verdance? Usually it comes down to some combination of Channel a Millennium Tree and Felling of the Crown. These two cards are going to carry probably 90% of your games. I think a key mistake that a lot of new Verdance players make is tunneling really hard on fancy shiny card Rampant Growth Life, which sometimes can make up for massive turns, but often is not really as effective as you might want it to be. Instead, what you want to lean into is how to get maximum value out of your trees and your fellings to get massively above rate turns on whatever your opponent is doing. To go into the nitty details a bit more, I'm going to have to go into some specific deck lists, so let's pull up some of the more recent lists in the meta so we can get a bit deeper. First deck list I want to go into is the gray list. It's been named like the Sergeant list or the Yum Yum list or, the Majin list if you don't know what's going on. Taken to an incredible run at Calling Memphis, as well as Battle Hardened Memphis by Jonathan Folk, who is a teammate of mine, also known as Gray. And then taken by Majin Bay, who took the list and made some slight adjustments and was able to win Battle Hardened Portland as well. I have some strong bias towards the list, and I have to acknowledge that as Gray is a teammate of mine, it's the list that I enjoy playing the most and the one that I have the most reps towards. The point of this list is to lean fully into Sergeant Aethertide and channel the Millennium Tree to maximize your Arcane Disruption as well as your race potential. Once you stick a tree in this list, it's all gas, no brakes, as you're trying to race your opponent down with your new sweet 2-for-4 weapon, and then follow that up with extra damage. It often looks to keep tree around for like 2 to 3 turns, grinding out a bunch of value from it, while consistently trying to keep your opponent off of 4-card hands so they can use to swing back at you. It has extra disruption with things like Mind Warp and being able to use Destructive Aethertide. It also fits in CNC, Fellings, and Plows, just like most lists do, for just that extra cherry on top, so you have 15 disruptive cards easily accessible in the deck. The second notable style list is the Trahey list or the Moon list, also known as the Kaiser list or Yuki list, depending on wherever you initially found it. The list has also performed pretty well, with Trahey originally getting second at Battle Hardened Barcelona, Yuki Lee Bender winning an RTN, and most recently Yohei Oki getting top 16 at Colin Kobe. Again, I'm going to keep mentioning the original users of the list until I hear otherwise about its origins, but Trahey is really the first one who brought this style of list into the forefront, so I'm going to give him the credit there. This looks to get online as fast as possible with an array of rainbow root bounds, as well as extra decompose to try to use the Verdance hero ability to its maximum potential. Notable additions to the list include some number of blue root bounds, Overflow the Aetherwell to better synergize with Moon that tends to be main board, Nourishing Emptiness to capitalize on the extra empty graveyard from the additional root bounds, Snapback for extra kill range, and biggest change is running Moon into most matchups to try to give you that extra kill threat. The point of this list is to push more damage than the Sergeant build, relying on the extra Verdance pings and the base 2 damage of Moon to push more damage and chip your opponent rather than relying on disruption. Cute combos like Tree with Overflow the Aetherwell allow you to push Arcane 2 to 3 turns in a row, while consistently chipping your opponent down to get within that extra kill range of Striders plus Moon. Runs a bit of extra decompose to try to get those extra Verdance pings in, as well as Nourishing Emptiness to try to capitalize on the extra decompose as well. It tends to run less disruption, no Mind Warp, no Command and Conquer, and instead uses the extra damage to supplement that. I'm not going to run through every card in every list, as I've linked them down below for you to scroll through, but I did want to note that each runs similar equipment in every matchup, except for the weapons where they vary slightly. The key to deciding which list you want to run is really whether or not you want to prioritize consistent disruption or more efficient damage. Once you have a list though, how do you play it? I'm going to run through some of the things that you can look for in both lists to try to get you your good turns and not your awful arcane turns. First things first, let's talk about some of the normal plays that you're going to be making all the time while playing Verdance. I'll be showcasing the gray style list as I talk about these, and maybe mentioning some specific line differences that are particular to the Trahey list afterwards, just to showcase a bit of the differences. The first and most important thing to do while playing Verdance is to know that your first 2 to 3 turns are going to suck real bad. Beyond the brick Verdance hands that you're going to draw later in the game, these hands just have no way to convert them effectively in an actually meaningful way. You need to take this early time in the game to stay healthy, set arsenals, gain life, and get earth cards in your grave. Earth card in grave is what I chant to myself on the first couple turns repeatedly. It does not matter if that earth card is a Plow Under, Felling, Blue Autumns, or Rootbound, you're going to need to get earth cards in grave so that you can start actually doing things that matter. Decompose is the payoff for most of the time, so you need to be able to actually use your Decompose. Quick aside when talking about Decompose, usually it is best to shoot for the 2-3-3 method of decomposing. That is 2 earth cards on the first Decompose, 3 on the next 2. This lets you get Verdance online the fastest and get that hero power rolling, but gives you the option when you decompose 2 on the first Decompose to pivot out if you end up not with enough earth cards engraved. Again, being able to use your Decompose is the most important thing, and not worrying about getting online first. Otherwise, when looking at Verdance, I like to think of there being 2 halves to the list, the Guardian side and the Wizard side. The Guardian side often just kind of plays itself. It's a pretty easy list to pilot if we only had this half of the list to worry about. Oftentimes, it involves just blocking 6 and sending some sort of attack, whether that be Felling of the Crown, Command and Conquer, Nourishing Emptiness, just something, Findal's Fighting Spirit, just a bunch of different attacks that you're going to block out, play your 2-card attack, and do your efficient min-rangey thing. Usually these come with some form of disruption, and you need to make sure that that disruption is actually worth playing. Don't send a Command and Conquer just because you're supposed to play your 2-card hand when your opponent doesn't have an arsenal. It's not a good look. A lot of times, if I think that these hands are not worth playing out, I will simply block out instead. Like I said, a big key to actually playing Verdance well is keeping your life total healthy for you to actually have good turns that are actually relevant. If you take damage to send irrelevant disruption or disruption that's easily stuffable from your opponent, you're going to lose a lot of your games. The other half of the list, and the half actually worth looking into in depth, is the wizard half of the list. The all blue hands, the rampant lines, the tree hands, the Verdance trigger amp shenanigans, heartbeat debate, blue pitches into surgent lines, correct plume target selection, surgent physical forks, responding to tree amps with ramp to damage stack. Oh, sorry, rambled a bit there. While there's a lot to cover here, I want to cover some sample combo lines, as well as some nice little small hand plays that you might not notice as a starting Verdance player. For most of these hands, I'm going to assume that Verdance hero ability is online, as it makes the lines a lot more expansive and can make finding optimal lines a bit more tricky. Firstly, the big tree hands. Tree is a big part of making Verdance able to actually keep up in damage races, so I want to cover some of that. Often I will set tree in arsenal, and then look for a hand that looks something like this. In this hand we have a blue, we have a earth blue, we have tree, and we have our disruptive spell, which in this case is going to be a Mind Warp. This is the type of hand that I like to take damage for to look to pivot. Walking through the hand is actually pretty easy. We just play out the tree, swing our Surgent Aethertide, and then cast our Mind Warp. The hand's value itself isn't crazy high. It comes in for 10 Arcane, as well as some disruption. However, when you can chain these back to back, and you draw something like this on the next hand, you can continue chaining the arcane damage and push a lot of damage for a little value. You can keep a small hand here and simply send Surgent into Pulsing Aethertide, which pushes another 12 arcane, and then lets you continue keeping the tree around. Once you know your tree is going to die, a lot of times I'll look for a 1-card play with Surgent into something, whether that be Surgent into CNC, Surgent into Felling, or Surgent into some other disruptive spell, not trying to maintain the tree. Beyond the tree hands, I want to get into some of the weirder hands. The most common of these is just some sort of healing potion combo. Let's assume a basic setup of 3 healing potions and a 5-card grip of our 3 rampant growths, a blue, and a spell. Healing potion combos are going to be your bread and butter against most slow matches, so it's important to know how to walk through them properly to give both yourself and your opponent all the clear information so that you know the math and they know the math and that everything is clean. So I want to walk through a healing potion together, and then that way you can see it in action and know the math for it. When you walk through the combo, I like to pop my potions one at a time, making sure that my opponent has ample time to respond to the Verdance triggers, pay for their AB if they would like to, as this is important for things like Ring, in case we get extra healing from there, or if our opponent wants to take some of this chip before we launch into the full combo, as they might not have all the resources to pay for all the pings and stop as much as they want on the Surgent Aethertide. Once we resolve all 3 healing potions, then it's time to start resolving our Rampant Growth lives. Again, I like to walk through them one at a time, make sure my opponent knows what's happening, so we'll play 1 Rampant Growth life. I let the Verdance trigger happen. Again, keeping the stack clean, I let my opponent know, hey, there's a Verdance trigger and the Rampant Growth. That way they have all the information. We let the Verdance trigger resolve, and then we keep the stack clean, stacking 1 Rampant Growth on top of the other. Again, I like to make sure they know that the stack is clear and represented, so we have a life, and then 2 Rampant Growths behind it. We let the life resolve, we let the Verdance trigger resolve, and then we continue on with the rest of the combo. We'll play our last Rampant Growth, allowing for now 3 Rampant Growths on the stack. Once the life resolves and the Verdance trigger resolves, we then resolve all 3 Rampant Growths so that our opponent then knows what's coming. Then we can do our math together with our opponent. We count out the healing, so we have 3 healing potions active, that's 6 healing, 1 from each of the Rampant Growths, so that is 9 total healing. If you got a Ring of Roses trigger in here, that would be 10 total healing each for an amp of 30. Or, if you just got the healing from the Rampant Growths, That is amp 9 each for amp 27. We then swing our Surgent Aethertide for either 28 or 31, depending on how much healing we were able to acquire. Usually I'll then represent this with dice if it's a smaller number, but if it's too big of a number and it's just going to kill them, I just state what it is. Then we swing with our follow-up spell, making sure it's clear how much is being amped by how much they prevented on the Surgent Aethertide, and then that completes the combo. This health potion combo, while strong, obviously requires a lot of setup and a 5-card hand in order to do actual lethal damage. Even just losing 1 card reduces our cap to just 2 rampants and a blue and a spell, or just 35 damage. With your opponent as being a super degenerate, you're not going to be able to actually kill them. A way around this, and what a lot of decks have been adopting, is the patent-pending min-maxing single energy potion. This allows you to pay for Surgent Aethertide with a potion instead of a blue, and now you can combo your opponent with 3 ramps and a spell without needing that blue for resources. It also allows you to do some degenerate nonsense like quadruple ramping your opponent if they're on some like Turbo CYB Bravo Cringelord deck, but this isn't really usually relevant. A lot of matchups, though, you won't have the potions in, so how do you actually use your Rampant Growths in a way that's actually relevant? Often I will arsenal a Rampant Growth life and wait for a Sigil of Solace, or the inverse, I'll arsenal a Sigil and wait for a Rampant Growth line, so I can find some sweet mid-range plays. These two combined can actually enable some absolutely disgustingly above rate hands that I'm going to show you one of here. So I have here a hand that's been set up that has a blue and felling, which is obviously already a good start to a gross hand, but we also have a Roots of the Forest, a Rampant Growth, and a Sigil of Solace. This is going on the assumption that we are aggressively arsenaling sigils and ramps, looking for the other piece to combo with. This is the only way you can actually try to find hands like this that actually do this type of thing. I want to walk this hand through and just show how absolutely gross it is, especially if you have Ring Out and Verdance online. This hand can get absolutely silly. So the first thing that I like to do is to bait out pings and try to get the Ring of Roses trigger through. So I'll play my Sigil of Solace, I let the heal resolve, and then I come in with the Verdance trigger. A lot of times your opponent is going to see this Verdance trigger. It's not really high value for them to just AB wildly, so a lot of times they will take this Verdance trigger. They'll take it, we'll gain a life, we'll send another Verdance trigger. So we've now gained 4 life and sent 2 pings. I'll discard a Fruits of the Forest, we'll let this resolve. We've now gained a total of 6 life. We have another Verdance trigger on the stack. We're going to respond to this Verdance trigger with a Rampant Growth life. So just like my previous examples, I like to keep the stack clean. So I play the Rampant Growth, I let the life resolve, I put the Verdance trigger on the stack so my opponent can clearly see what's going on. I use extra Verdances to represent extra pings. It's just something nice and clear. I highly recommend having multiple Verdances or something to represent the extra pings, as it can get a bit confusing without them. We let all this resolve. Once we let these resolve, we have another ping coming in for 1, and then we count up our Rampant Growth, so we have healed 3 from the Sigil, 2 from the Fruits, 1 from the Ring, and 1 from the Rampant Growth life for a total of 7 healing. That makes this ping come in for 8 damage. We have now done 4 pings, each for 1 damage, and then 1 of the pings came in for 8. So we have sent a total of 11 Arcane. We then follow this up by sending a Felling of the Crown, which then makes them bottom another card, if they had pitched to Arcane already, as well as sending in 8 physical. So we got a total of 22 value simply from damage, not counting the 7 healing we got. This is 29 value, an absolutely insane amount of value for a mid-range non-combo hand. These types of turns are what actually lets Verdance win games and swing games back in her favor. And the thing is, you don't even have to draw the exact right hand because of this broken ass hat. This hat makes all the other hats, not you Traverse, jealous because of its flexibility and the ability to enable just absolutely gross hands super consistently. Missing that Felling from the last hand, just had it. Missing the ramp but you arsenaled the Sigil, just had it. Missing a spell for lethal, just had it. Missing that childhood wonderment and just like happiness and hoping card games replace it, just had it. Finding a good moment to use your plume and swinging the game or pushing tempo harder is definitely a tough skill for Verdance players to fully master, and I think there's like always room for improvement on that front. I think the common thing to look for is all blue hands, as they usually enable the most shenanigans with Verdance and allow you to fetch whatever you want to best fit the situation. If you have tempo but you miss on disruption, it's often also a good idea to use hat to refetch a felling or some other piece of big combo to keep that pressure up and keep the tempo on the game. At this point, I'm going to talk about some minor playline changes around the Trahelas. Firstly, since you don't have Surge and Aethertide, but instead of Moon, you are not looking to stick trees nearly as aggressively, but instead chip with Moon. Little plays like Tree into Overflow Moon just lets you push some extra damage, while setting up the opportunity to just play like a 1-card hand the next turn for more arcane chip. If you want a more deep dive into each card in the list, I have linked the original deck tech from Arthur Trahe. I've gone ahead and linked some more recent versions of these types of builds in the description. I want to go into a more in-depth deck tech on my version of the current Yum Yum list, so that you can get some more details on every card choice, what cards you might want to side out for local metas, that type of thing. So keep an eye out for that in the future, because I think that's going to be pretty important if you want to make a deck list of your own. Lastly in this video, I just want to go through some commonly asked questions regarding Verdance that I see all the time. First question is, when should I decline Verdance pings? The most common use case of this is when you want to fetch a Rampant Growth with your hat, but you don't already have one in grave, so you have to put one into the grave and then let the triggers resolve. I'm going to go ahead and show an example of this where you want to quadruple ramp your opponent, but you don't have the card in grave. The setup for an energy potion combo is a bit more strict than the setup for a random triple rampant combo, and as such it takes a bit more to set up, and you're not going to use it into every matchup. Usually it's just the most degenerate of fatigue decks or somebody that's really trying to stuff your combo. The setup is just all 3 potions, our energy potion, and then you're going to need a hand of 3 rampant growths, an extra blue, and a 0-cost spell. It must be a 0-cost spell now. We cannot fit in our pulsing aethers anymore with this combo. We walk through the combo just like a regular Verdance combo. We activate all 3 of our healing potions, and I would walk through this slowly just like I normally would with any other combo, letting the triggers resolve and giving our opponent ample time to think about their arcane barrier. Then we play our Rampant Growths. Again, I would resolve the stacks individually, let the Verdance triggers resolve, but I'm just going to go through this as I already showed how to kind of do that. Now the main difference is what to do with this last Rampant Growth, because after it resolves, it goes to the graveyard, and in order to quadruple ramp, we're going to need to refetch it here. So we're going to pitch our extra blue, and we're going to use our hat to refetch this Rampant Growth life. Now keep in mind that the first Rampant Growth life, the back of the stack, has already resolved, so there's already amp that's already happening. So when we resolve this Rampant Growth and the life trigger happens, we need to make sure that we actually decline this Verdance trigger. So this Verdance trigger here, that's the Verdance trigger that we're going to have to decline, otherwise it will eat all of our amp. Then we'll go ahead and resolve the rest of our Rampant Growths. So we've now resolved 4 Rampant Growths. It's important to note that the first Rampant Growth only sees the healing that has already happened on the turn, so it's going to see 3 lives and the 3 healing potions. However, all 3 of the rest of the Rampant Growths are going to see 4 lives and all 3 healing potions. Once we calculate out our total amp, we're going to activate our energy potion and use that to swing our Surge and Aethertide, and then follow it with our 0-cost spell. The combo cap for this is about 80, usually it is 30 on each of the Rampant Growth lives, as well as the extra one for 9 amp, and then that will swing Surge and Aethertide for 40, and then the spell for 41. How do I beat?
Insert aggro deck here.
Most of the time, the answer is a little basic, but it's basically don't take damage to do anything that isn't broken. Don't take damage to send a pointless zap, don't take damage to do, don't take damage to send blue fruits, don't take damage to send an Autumn's Touch, don't take damage to send Summer's Falls with no decomposes. Simply take damage to do your broken things. Take damage to do big tree turns, take damage to do fellings. Otherwise, you're trying your best to survive for anything that's actually above rate. How do I beat Illusionist? Depends on how much you want to turn to God. I think the best approach is to really stand a stretch and then knock over your opponent's deck, hoping that they secretly have 6 copies of Mirror Guy, allowing you to get a quick DQ. Beyond that, the actual answer is just grinding out with go again attacks, sending Surge into bunch probably like 50 times, and then hoping to clear their board so you can combo with like a semi-okay life total to try to hit. How do I beat New? If you're good at slots, you can simply get lucky and then they miss their Siren's calls. But if you see CYB, it can be pretty tough. The best options are to keep an anti-CYB tech if you have any, in case they are on CYB, and then usually you want to grind out with attacks continually until you can get them into an okay life total that you can actually combo somewhat effectively. Do not go all in on combo into new. This is a losing game plan, as they should be able to counterstack you and deny your combo effectively. Do you ever side out your rampant growths? A little bit. I'll side them out into very aggressive matchups, or where I think I need the block value more effectively. Currently, I am siding them out into Aurora and Dash.io, but I expect that to change on the Aurora side. It's just some testing that I've been doing. I do think siding them out can be an okay choice, and in a decks like Aurora Syndra, there are definitely upsides to not having them in. Should I get a Heart of Findall? Probably not. It's a rare case that it actually does something, and sometimes it's a strict downside. So just toss in any 3-block blue zap, and you'll probably be fine. If you have other questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments, and I'll be happy to answer, but the best way to learn is definitely just grinding the deck out. It can seem easy at the first, but you're going to lose a lot of games making just pointless trades, so definitely the best way is just get out there and grind Talishar. I'll see you when the win rate starts tanking. I've also linked a more budget version of Verdance along with the regular ones. The list is more arcane focused and doesn't have the things like Felling of the Crown and Plow Under, so it's not nearly as decomposed focused, but it can definitely get you there, and it's better than selling your body parts to get started. Thanks for watching. Click all the, buttons and stuff, and I'll probably see you next time.